Hello and welcome to, well, not quite a review of Finding Paradise, a game for PC, Mac, and Linux, and of course what you're seeing here is on PC, and I'll also be taking a look at its prequel, A Bird Story. This is part of a genre I've taken to calling interactive stories, because they're not quite walking simulators. They don't play out like a normal walking simulator would, where you're just in first person wandering around looking at things. But there's not enough puzzle-solving gameplay for me to really classify it as an adventure game, and even though it runs on the RPG Maker engine, it's definitely not a role-playing game or a JRPG of any kind. But regardless of what you want to classify it as, it was developed by Freebird Games and published in December of last year, and it is the follow-up to the Moon and A Bird Story. And since I'm covering A Bird Story in this video as well, I also want to mention that that was also developed by Freebird Games, although it was released 3 years prior to Finding Paradise, even though it is basically the direct prequel to Finding Paradise. Now, the thing about covering these two titles is that they are extremely story-driven and they're also extremely short, which is why the vast majority of the footage is going to be just early stuff from Finding Paradise, and then when I mention A Bird Story, I'm going to show a bit of footage of that as well. And that's in an effort to avoid spoilers as much as I possibly can, because that's one of the more interesting things about these two titles, especially Finding Paradise, and that was something that was also very present in To the Moon as well. Now, if you're wondering what I think about To the Moon, I made a video on it several years ago, and unfortunately the audio quality in that video is absolutely atrocious, so I might go ahead and redo that video at some point. But if you want the short version, To the Moon and also Finding Paradise and A Bird Story are the kind of thing you're either going to like or you're not going to like. There's not going to be any sort of in-between. If you're gameplay-oriented, you are not going to like any of them. If you are story-oriented, then you may like them. And at least as far as To the Moon was concerned, I thoroughly enjoyed it, but that doesn't necessarily translate to enjoying Finding Paradise and A Bird Story. So let's go ahead and delve right into these things and find out what exactly we're dealing with here. Now, before we get into the meat of these things, let's first talk about the presentation, which, like I said, runs in RPG Maker engine, which means that the visual style emulates that of old SNES JRPGs like Final Fantasy VI, for example. This means that it's all in pixel art from a top-down perspective, and they've put a decent amount of detail into the sprite work, and it is actually slightly improved over To the Moon. Now, that said, the visuals aren't going to win any awards anytime soon, but they do certainly get the job done, and there is quite a bit of charm behind them. This is partly because even though the visuals are certainly not impressive, they're used to solid enough effect, but it's also because there are just numerous moments throughout the game that are downright silly, and when something downright silly happens in the game, you can't help but at least have a chuckle out of it. But beyond the silly moments, it's also the fact that not only is it being used to good effect, but there's also some slight touches here and there that really do elevate the pixel art beyond simply being, oh, it's another pixel art game. But then you move over into sound design, and that's where things get more impressive as far as the presentation goes. And that's primarily due to the soundtrack, which is very well done. It does use some music from previous Freebird games, but that's all tonally very consistent with what you see in Finding Paradise and of course A Bird Story as well. So even though that bit of the music that is reused is used from previous games, it doesn't feel like it was taken from a separate game and stuck into the mix here. And ultimately, not only does it all fit together very naturally, but like in To the Moon, it tugs at your heartstrings a bit on occasion. But of course the reason it tugs at your heartstrings is related to the story, so that's something I'll get to more in a moment. The rest of the sound design, however, is not quite as impressive as the music, because the sound effects do their job, but they're nothing more than that. And there's no voice acting in the game at all, so there's really nothing to say about that. So when you bring all the presentation together, what you find is that both in Finding Paradise and A Bird Story, the only thing that really stands out is the music. But then we get to what really matter, which are especially the story, but also the gameplay. I'll go ahead and get the gameplay out of the way first, because there's really nothing to talk about there as far as A Bird Story goes, and even Finding Paradise barely has anything in it. The gameplay of A Bird Story consists of walking around and maybe interacting with something here and there. And that's pretty much it. Meanwhile, Finding Paradise's gameplay consists of walking around, interacting with things, and occasionally solving a fairly basic block puzzle. There are also a couple moments here and there that do have additional gameplay mechanics that are not particularly well implemented, but those would be pretty heavy spoilers, so I'm actually not going to go over those right now. Because I'm trying to keep this video as spoiler-free as I possibly can, considering that the story is really where all of the meat of these two titles lies. I'll go ahead and talk about A Bird Story first, because it's actually a sort of prequel to what you see in Finding Paradise, and on top of that, it's the shortest of the two, and it's the simplest of the two. It's an interactive movie, really. It's about an hour long with absolutely no dialogue in it whatsoever, and it consists of just telling a story about a boy who finds an injured bird and tries to kind of nurse it back to health, and it kind of blurs the line between reality and his imagination during the process. As a whole, it's a fairly heartwarming and sometimes kind of funny story that's really not much more than an experimental project by the developer, and it's really meant to be a bit of an interquel between To the Moon and Finding Paradise, although it really doesn't have much to do with either of them. That said, Finding Paradise does reference it a few times, so if you've gone through A Bird Story and you play Finding Paradise after that, then you're going to notice those moments and be like, oh, I get it. But even if you haven't gone through A Bird Story, you're not really missing all that much if you don't go through it and then try to go through Finding Paradise instead. All of the titles in this series, To the Moon, A Bird Story, and Finding Paradise, are all considered fully standalone titles. You do not have to have played one of the previous games to understand what's going on in the new ones. That said, even though it's definitely not mandatory to go through A Bird Story and To the Moon in order to understand what's going on in Finding Paradise, you still get more out of it if you have gone through those titles, so it's something I would recommend looking into first. Now then, let's go ahead and talk about Finding Paradise, where it follows Dr. Roslin and Dr. Watts after the events of To the Moon, where they have to move on to a new patient named Colin. Now, Dr. Roslin and Watts both are part of Sigmund Corporation, which specializes in memory adjustment, for lack of a better term. Basically, they have a machine that they use to traverse through a dying person's memories and make changes here and there in order to fulfill their last wish. The idea there being that if somebody's dying, they can have any of their last regrets at least cleared up in their mind before they pass on. But when they go into Colin's mind to find out what exactly he wants, he tells them that he basically doesn't want anything from his life changed, but he still wants something to be different anyway. That's a request that both confuses the doctors and the player, because when they go in to alter the memories and fulfill their last wish, they specifically have to change things in order for it to actually work out. But the doctors ultimately decide, well, let's keep going, I guess, and they keep traversing through his memories and learning more and more about what he regrets and why he regrets it and that sort of thing. And as they progress through his memories, they find that something's just not right with them. They're not set up in the way that they would normally expect, and there are things here and there that just seem really off to them. And again, I really don't want to spoil the plot for you just in case you do want to go through this, because the plot is the one reason you would actually play through the game. But what you'll find if you go through the game are numerous moments where you'll just be chuckling or outright laughing because something outright funny happens, or you'll encounter a moment that's really heartwarming, or sometimes something that's even very sad, because this is a character's life. It's not necessarily all going to be sunshine and rainbows. And the combination of what's actually going on with the music is really what makes it tug at your heartstrings an awful lot, and if you're like me, then there's actually a pretty decent chance that you might tear up towards the end of it, or outright cry if you're more emotional than I am. And that's just it. Like To the Moon, Finding Paradise is all about evoking an emotional response from the player. And while it does do a very good job of that, it honestly does not do that good of a job of actually being a video game, because there's really not much in the way of gameplay there to back up what you're seeing as far as the plot goes. And again, that's why this is not quite a review. Instead of doing what I would normally do in a review and put a score at the end of it to just kind of summarize the whole experience, this is really one of those you either really like it or you really don't like it kind of deals. In my particular case, it went as follows. I thoroughly enjoyed To the Moon and would highly recommend it to people who it appealed to, but then I played through A Bird Story, and I wasn't all that impressed with it. But now that I have played through Finding Paradise, I actually appreciate A Bird Story a lot more, which leads me into Finding Paradise itself, which I also thoroughly enjoyed. It's not quite the same as To the Moon. It's still a very emotional experience, but it's a different kind of emotional experience than what you see in To the Moon. And I feel like it is best when combined with A Bird Story, because it does actually reference A Bird Story a fair bit. But Finding Paradise, and especially A Bird Story, really aren't for everyone. If what you want is a sort of emotional storytelling experience, then these are pretty much the games for you. But if you want gameplay and nothing else, then these are definitely not the games for you. They occupy a bit of an odd niche, but I'd say that if that niche appeals to you, then you should definitely go for it and pick these up. But I would say if you have not played To the Moon first, then go ahead and play To the Moon first, and then decide whether or not you want to pick up A Bird Story and Finding Paradise after that or not. But if you already played To the Moon and liked it, then go ahead and pick up Finding Paradise because you'll definitely enjoy that. And as for A Bird Story, well, maybe. Just know that A Bird Story is a more experimental piece, and it's not meant to be exactly like To the Moon and Finding Paradise. I will of course have links in the video description box to where you can pick these up if you're interested. Thanks for watching.